Good glorious morning and welcome to Searching for C-Shels. In this episode, we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to show you the tools, the resources, the conditions, the procedures we follow to ensure a safe and pleasant crossing across the Gulf Stream, whether it's from Florida to the Bahamas or Bahamas to Florida. Stay tuned.
I'm Cindy, and this is Shell. We sold everything and set off on an adventure, living and cruising on a boat named C-Shel. Click, subscribe, and sit back as we show you that it's possible for all of us to live an extraordinary life.
We get this question a lot, actually, whether it's from new cruisers wanting to cross the Gulf Stream for the first time, or even seasoned cruisers that thought their protocol was adequate to get across safely, but got hit by a bad one. We're all going to get hit by a bad one eventually. If you cruise long enough, you're going to hit some bad weather and possibly do it while you're on the Gulf Stream crossing. So you can do the best you can, and that's what I'm going to show you. This is the best that I've come up with. I've been cruising and crossing the Gulf Stream for almost 10 years. So we've done it a number of times, and we've got caught in some bad weather a number of times. We made some mistakes, and we've made some corrections in the way that we determine our crossing window. So first off, let's talk about our preferred conditions. This is what we have cultivated over the years and determined that this is what is pleasurable for us. So the protocol for the wave conditions goes like this for us. We want the wave period to be 3 times the wave height. So that means if the wave height is 3 feet, we want the period to be 9 seconds. So this will ensure that it's probably just a slow roll and not a sharp, really close frequency waves. And that's for anything over 2 feet. If the waves are 2 feet and they're choppy, I don't really care. But if it's 4 feet, we want 12 seconds of wave period. Usually we don't get that kind of thing. Usually it's 3 with 9 seconds, or it's waves are 2 to 3 feet at 9 seconds. That's usually the kind of conditions we have. And then there's, most of the time we'll get, 1 to 2 footers. We wait for a day that's 1 to 2, and we don't really care about the wave period. But if we're stuck for a window and we're looking, hey, can we go into 3 to 4s? Then we want a period of 9 to 12. That may seem extreme, but that's what we're comfortable with. This is pleasure boating for us, and we want to have a nice day when we cross. So we're not in a rush. We'll do what's most comfortable for us. Other people, it depends on the boat, and the people that are cruising may have some totally different protocol of what's comfortable for them to get across. They can go maybe in 5 footers at 10 seconds. I don't know. But if I was stabilized, I would be able to go in much more inclement conditions. So the boat's not stabilized. So if we get a beam C at the right frequency, this boat is going to roll and we're going to be uncomfortable all day. So we don't do it. We just don't do it. The other thing, we want the wind to be from the east through to the west. We do not take any winds, no matter how calm, from the north. And you've probably heard this before, and that is a north wind in the Gulf Stream can be pretty bad. So a north wind against the current of the Gulf Stream, so wind against current, can turn that place into a washing machine. The difference between 5 knots in the Gulf Stream can mean, a nice day or a really crappy one. So from 5 to 10 knots, 5 knots, it might be nice to go in the Gulf Stream in 5 knots from the north or northerly component to the wind. Pushes to 10, that's a little uncomfortable. Push it to 15, to me, I wouldn't be going in anything like that from the north. Some people do, and some people are fine with it and they're comfortable with it. We are not. We have left in a north wind before on a calm day, and the weather was a little off, so the forecasting was off. So we only, say they were calling for 5 to 8 knots of north wind, and it just so happened it was more like 12 to 15. and we got caught in a squall. So if the wind is already from the north at 10 knots, let's say, and then it gusts up to 20, 25 in a squall in the same direction, boy, that's going to turn into a mess. It really is. So we just don't do it. We don't go in any northerly component whatsoever. You may think that's overly cautious, but we've had the experience where it's been very uncomfortable, so we don't do it anymore. Well, let's talk about the resources and tools that I use to determine a good weather window. First off, it is windy. So windy.com. And I use this for the European model, the ECMWF, and the GFS forecast. Those are the two primary ones I am looking at to determine if there's a window within the next 14 to 16 days. I will compare that with Marv's weather. So there's a website, marvsweather.com, and has some good crossing weather forecasting for the normal areas you would cross the Gulf Stream for. As I get closer to a window, if I see one in those two models that are or in Marv's and the ECMWF and GFS, and we're about 5 days out, I'll start bringing in the NOAA marine weather for the area that I want to cross in. So what I'm really looking for is alignment for all of those forecasts. So I want NOAA marine forecasts, I want Marv's, and I want the GFS and the European model to pretty much align around a day and give a fairly similar forecast. So I'm not looking for one that is really way off and the rest may be kind of similar. If I see one that's way off, I'm gonna say there's some variability in the forecast, I'll keep that day in mind and watch as the day gets closer if that other forecast that was a little off comes into alignment with the rest of them. If we get close to the day and there's any variability in the forecast between those models, we just won't go. We won't go. We will wait until those weather forecasts are aligned. One thing I should mention about windy is that I use this as it's the interface that I like to display the data from the European and the GFS models. There are other interfaces and other apps that will use that weather data and display it in a different way or a very similar way. So you may prefer a different interface to get those two models to show you the weather information, the forecasting information. So since I like windy, I have paid for premium. So that gives me more frequently updated forecasts and a longer range forecast so I can see further into the future. The reason I like windy is because it gives me some added features I like the features of the alerts that I can set up for wave and weather conditions and the routing that I can set to a certain day and then see what the weather is as I go through the cruise for the day. I'll show that to you momentarily. So once I have alignment and I'm about 2 days out, I'm going to bring in one more resource, and that is the Chris Parker weather forecast for the crossings. And I get this from the Bahamas Land and Sea group on Facebook. Addison Chan, the owner of that group, posts almost every day, if not every day, the Chris Parker generalized weather forecast for crossings of the Gulf Stream. So I will bring that into my data sets and I will look and see, okay, does Chris Parker align with all of the rest of the models? And if he does, we're going across the Gulf Stream. I will say that I've also paid for Chris Parker. So they have a personalized service where based on your boat and your conditions you're looking for, he will give you the forecast specifically for your boat and let you know when you should be crossing, things like that. I have used it in the past when I've not had time to do this kind of forecasting or do this kind of analysis on a good crossing day, and he's come in handy. So I'd recommend that as well. So here's how my system is set up so that I can quickly access the weather forecasts and see if we have a window. So first off, I use tab groups, and most modern browsers have a tab group, and I will make a tab group of the resources that I just mentioned, windy, MARVs, and NOAA marine weather, as a tab group for the area that I'm crossing. So you'll see here, crossing weather, Miami to Bimini, and I'll have windy, MARVs, and NOAA loaded. Just really quickly, click the tab group, and those three windows pop up. Besides the tab group, I will also save these resources in my personal cruising guide in the C-Shel Yacht Management System under Bahamas and under weather. And I will have all of these resources listed here for myself for future reference. More on the C-Shel Yacht Management System coming in a future episode and the release of that system to the boating public. So how do I have Windy set up to help determine a good weather window? So the first thing I like, and this is probably one of the, besides me in the nighttime lying in bed looking at the 16-day forecast that I get on Windy, I have alerts set up. So I have alerts set up for my conditions that I'm looking for, the conditions that I told you about before. And what will happen is that Windy will send me an email that matches the conditions that I'm looking for. Here you'll see I want wind that's 0 to 10 knots, and from the wind directions that I want nothing from a northerly direction. I wanted a fairly nice day and at least 6 hours of window with these conditions, and any day of the week. The waves I'll have from pretty much any direction. It doesn't really matter. And what will happen is when Windy sees that day that meets those conditions in the forecast, it will send me an email. So I should, as I'm looking, be expecting an email that looks like this. So here, look, I have this was one for, I think, our actual crossing day that we crossed the Bahamas last week. On the 27th, it sent me an alert saying, hey, you've got, your day is coming for crossing the Gulf Stream from to Bimini. So, and it sent me, here's what we're looking at. So Saturday, you know, this was kind of the range it was looking at. Once I get this email, I go into Windy to make sure that what I'm looking at is correct. And for sure it was correct. So another thing that Windy gives me is the ability to plot the route across the Gulf Stream that I'm taking, and then lay that route across a day and see what the forecast and winds will be as I travel across it. So we'll see here that I have in my favorites, I have a crossing Miami to Bimini. So if I click that, you can see from Key Biscayne to Bimini, 46.1 nautical miles across. And I'll show you exactly how I use that in a moment. So here's my full workflow in a nutshell. So 14 to 16 days out, I am looking at Windy, placing a point in the middle of my route, and I am looking in the forecast for a day that looks pretty much blue, maybe light green, white, like this. So let's say the 14th here, I'm looking at, oh, that looks like a pretty fine day. That might be a possibility. I'll expect a notification from Windy on that day, so I'll wait for that as well. I will compare that day. So what is the next Friday? Okay, so we've got a next Friday, 2 to 3 footers. Winds are a bit more here on Marv's weather for that day. Let's see, the 14th. So I'll keep this in my sights to see, hey, does Marv's start to align? And I will look here. This is the ECMWF, the European model. This is, and then I'll flick it over to the GFS to see if I get the same, and I pretty much do. So Friday looks like it might align. I'm just waiting now on Marv's to align. It looks like there's a little bit more wind. Marv is forecasting for March 14th. Still might be a good day, given the conditions. The wave height is not too bad, 2 to 3, periods of about 8 seconds. That's not bad. It looks like the period picks up. So I'll keep an eye on this day until it gets closer. As we get into the 5-day forecast, I'm going to go to the NOAA Marine forecast, and I will look up the area that I need, which is from coastal waters from Deerfield Beach to Ocean Reef. That's where we cross from, or we have crossed from. And you're going to want to look like for both out to 20 miles and 20 to 60 nautical miles. So that's going to take you right across the Gulf Stream entirely. So obviously this now is not going into Friday the 14th, but let's just pretend that this was Friday, 5 to 10 knots, coming southeast, seas 4 to 6 feet, occasionally 8 feet, wave detail. Ooh. So if this was out of alignment at this late, and is this within the 5-day forecast, I would say there's some variability in the forecast and I'm not going to go. What I would expect to see is NOAA be in alignment with the GFS and the European model and Mars at this point. And don't think just because you have one model that matches your conditions that you want across the Gulf Stream, that is not necessarily going to be the conditions you're going to get if you decide to go. You're taking a chance if you've got one model that shows you that it's going to be good that day. There's a good chance that it's not going to be good that day. So as we get 1 to 2 days out, like I said, I'm going to bring in another forecast, and that is Chris Parker's forecast that Addison Chan posts on Facebook on the Bahamas Land and Sea group. So I want this one as well to align to the rest of the forecasting that I've been getting for the last while. So here is an example of one. Crossings is what I'll be looking at for the most part. I'm going to want to make sure if I'm crossing from Miami to Bimini that I'm going to see eastbound conditions is good for motoring. So Chris Parker is going to use the words motoring and sailing for, motorboat or sailboat, or if you are in a sailboat and you want to motor. So I'm going to look for a good eastbound motoring day, and he will mention that in his crossings forecast. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for wave heights and periods. And of course, I'm looking for no northerly winds in his forecast. At this point, I am starting to do trip plans in my C-Shel yacht management captain's log. I'm doing a forecasting captain's log. So in my timeline, in the future, I have crossings put in with a date that I expect to be crossing. And this way I can do a future plan of what my trip is going to look like, or when I think the appropriate days to cross will be. So as you can see here on March 1st, I have a captain's log entry that actually happened. But this one here, Bimini to Great Harbor Key to Nassau, these are all forecasted in the future. These are empty captain's log entries in the future. Great tool for forecasting and doing your trip plan. Again, more on that in the future episode. So the day before the crossing, I am going to analyze my route in Windy. So as I said previously, I've got these routes saved in my favorites from Miami to Bimini. So here we are. So I've selected boat down on the bottom. I got a speed of 8 knots. I'm going to turn that on so it knows. So here, look, it knows that where I'm going to start and when I'm going to finish based on my speed. So I'm going to move this to the day that I need it to be in. I'm going to change this to 7.5 knots. That's probably more likely the average speed that I'm going to be in. So as you can see, I've got a route here, and I can move my mouse across the whole day for that 6 hours that I'm going to be traveling and see what the conditions are going to be for that whole time that I'm going to be crossing. I could move this around. Let's say I want to start, I'm going to start at 7 a.m. in the morning instead, and I'll get there at 1 p.m. So it's usually a 6-hour cruise from outside Key Biscayne. And again, you can see what it's going to be like the whole time, including wave heights, wind direction, and gusts, things like that. So the night before, we're going to actually just physically gauge what the weather feels like. And Cindy has a good sense of what tomorrow's going to be like the night before. If it doesn't feel right, she's probably right. We've gone when she said, should the winds be feeling like this right now? And we've gone in the morning and it wasn't good. So this has happened a number of times that I've learned to take Cindy's sixth sense in terms of weather. So if she's a bit in doubt, I will take that into account on whether we should be going or not. I'll compare this to, of course, the variability in all of the forecasts. She's been wrong as well sometimes before, but this is something that we will gauge the night before. On crossing day, we're going to set off as early as we can, or what makes sense for the weather. And we have it in our minds that there's no shame in turning around. So we will poke our nose out there, and if we don't like it, we will turn right back around and wait for a different day. We are not into being uncomfortable. We want this to be pleasure boating, so that's the kind of conditions that we strive for. Now, we've gotten halfway across, and it's been too late to turn around. It's been just as well to go forward and press on, and we've done that. But usually if we poke our nose out in the Gulf Stream, let's say we're out, 5 or 10 miles, we will turn around. Actually, we have in our mind that we will turn around. I don't think we have ever turned around, to be honest with you. So that's it. That's how we cross the Gulf Stream safely and comfortably. I hope you've learned something. And I'm hoping to learn something from you in the comments below, because I know you've got your own ways that you do it. And if there's anything that you would like to fill me in on how you do it, please do so. I definitely want to learn from you guys on how you guys pick a Gulf Stream crossing and do it safely and comfortably. And that's it for now. We'll see you in the Bahamas sometime soon. Cheers.